Have you ever had the pleasure of dealing with someone who was hard to please? Like nothing you ever did was good enough. No matter how hard you tried, it was just never enough. Well, what if we viewed God in the same way? How would that impact our relationship with Him? And how would that affect the way we communicate God to others? Well, if we view God as hard to please, we're going to live a life full of stress and full of works trying to earn our way into the good grace of God. Well, one day I was sitting and reading this passage of scripture, and I was reading it in a different translation. And I had another one of those poof moments. You know, we're talking about clearing God's name. We don't like to be misrepresented when people say things about us that aren't true. And I believe with all my heart that God also does not like to be misrepresented when people believe things about Him that are not true, especially when they create a barrier and a blockage between people being able to come into relationship with Him freely as His sons and as His daughters. And so this is our fourth video on clearing my name. And we're talking about bringing a clear understanding of the nature and character of God to the degree that it's been shared with us. We all have a piece, right? So we're going to talk today about this mind-blowing revelation about God. It was mind-blowing to me, at least, when I was reading this scripture from Matthew chapter 11, and it was verse 28 through 30. And I was reading it in a new translation, one that I wasn't accustomed to. So these words just jumped out me, and I don't know, maybe they'll jump out to you in the same way. But this is Jesus talking. And Jesus says, "Are you weary, carrying a heavy burden? Then come to me. I will refresh your life. For I am your oasis." You know, I'm following at this point. I'm following. Yes, that sounds familiar. I'm following. I can agree. All this makes sense to me. Yes, this is Jesus. Then he goes on and says, "Simply join your life with mine. Learn my ways and you'll discover that I am gentle." Yes, I agree. Jesus, you are gentle. "That I am humble." Yes, yes, of course, Lord, you're humble. "Easy to please." What? Easy to please? Uh-uh. Out of my mouth, as I read this scripture, I threw my head back and laughed, and I said, "Easy to please? No way." But this was Jesus talking about himself. Now let's finish this out. He says he's easy to please, okay? "You'll find refreshment and rest in me, for all that I require of you will be pleasant and easy to bear." Well, let me tell you, when I read that passage of scripture, after I got done laughing, I realized that I was at this beautiful crossroad where I could either hold on to my experience and what was handed down to me in the picture that I allowed to be painted on the imagination of my heart concerning God as a harsh taskmaster, one that was impossible to please no matter what I did. Now, I would never verbalize that or say God was impossible to please, but I lived that way because I was always striving, trying to be good enough for God. So I could hold on to that old mindset, or I could look at what Jesus actually said about himself, his own words. "I'm easy to please." Are you kidding me? I mean, I'll be honest with you, that still kind of rings a little different kind of way on the inside of me today. And this was years ago that I came across this. And I've been allowing that understanding to permeate my heart and reflect even in my life and my actions. So just in case you're still, maybe over on the side and you're like, "I'm not familiar with that translation." By the way, that was the Passion. I'm going to read it in the New International and in the Amplified, just for the sake of agreement, right? So this is the New International Version, and this is verse 30, talking about Jesus's comment about himself that he's easy to please. And in the NIV it says, "For my yoke is easy, my burden is light." Okay, so that's an agreement with him being easy to please. His yoke is easy and his burden light. And look at this in the Amplified. Verse 30, it says, "For my yoke is wholesome." And then in parentheses here, it gives us an explanation. "Useful, good, not harsh, hard, sharp, or oppressing, but comfortable, gracious, and pleasant." Oh my. "And my burden is light and easy to be borne." Now, I don't know if you're like me, but that had not been my experience up to that point. I constantly felt this need to perform and to be good enough. I had to be a good Christian, and that burden was very heavy, and it was constant and it was oppressive and full of pressure. Okay. So if you are like me and you are living in that way, I hope that this understanding, clearing God's name, just brings a whole new level of freedom to you and an opportunity to choose what God has said about himself over our perceived experience with him. And what I had to do was step back and say, well, Lord, if you're easy to please, then who is it that I'm trying to please? Because your yoke is easy and your burden is light. So if I find myself striving and working so hard just to be, then I know that I'm serving a different master in that sense. And of course, I use my quotations there because we really wouldn't see ourselves as serving another master, but the reality is still there. Maybe I'm serving this image that I have created of God, that he's harsh and that he's demanding and that I always have to work and strive just to be in his good graces. That's another master. That's not the good father, right? Jesus says his yoke is easy and his burden is light. And in the Passion, it says that he's easy to please. Wow. So I'm not here to tell you all that entails today. I just want to present you with that plate, present you with that revelation, with that understanding. Maybe you've already got it. That's fantastic. But maybe to you, like me, this was a news flash, easy to please. You've got to be kidding me. I don't think so at all. But you know what? Even if you're there, all God needs from us is a willingness and an open heart. And you know what I did? I sat back and I said, Lord, this is hard for me to swallow because I don't feel like my walk with you has been one of a Lord, of a God that is easy to please. It has felt very taxing, to say the least, trying to be a good Christian, trying to be what I felt like I needed to be. So Lord, if this is my experience, that means I'm believing something wrong, because you said about yourself that you are easy to please. Your yoke was easy. Didn't say a yoke didn't exist, but he said that it was an easy yoke and it was light. And so I'm asking you, God, to show me where I've believed lies that have caused me to think the opposite of what you said about yourself. Show it to me so that I can live out this life that you designed for me, not one that I've created so I can feel good enough, like I've earned my place, but one that you have designed for me, where the yoke you have for me is fitted just for me. Now that's another way we know. Also, maybe I'm trying to carry another person's yoke. Well, I'm looking at the way they live life and I'm trying to duplicate it or replicate it. Well, maybe that works for them. But when I try to do it, it becomes heavy and burdensome. And it's anything but easy and light and easy to please, because maybe I've taken on someone else's yoke and tried to fit it upon myself. But we're not the same. So ask God, where is it that I believed lies about you? Where is it that I've taken on burdens and yoke that don't belong to me, that is making my life and my walk with you unpleasant? If we can just be honest with God, you know? You ever wanted to just throw up your hands and say, I'm done with this whole Christian thing? You know, it's okay to be honest sometimes, because God is not afraid of low places, and he's certainly not afraid of the truth or even how we're feeling. Ask David. He wrote a whole bunch of Psalms about how he felt, and God's not running from our feelings. So we can be honest with him about that. But if we find ourselves in that place, it's probably because we've taken on a yoke of religion. We maybe took on a yoke that belonged to another person that God equipped them for, but not us. And we're taking it on ourselves and trying to live it out, and it is not producing good fruit. So ask God today, where have you believed a lie that made you think his yoke was not easy, that he was not easy to please? And Lord, flood our hearts today with light and help us to realize that you're good and that your yoke is easy, your burden is light. And you said that you are easy to please. Thank you so much for joining me on the journey today. I hope to see you again next time. Bye-bye.